Age of Renaissance. Well, I thought it was time for another video, and this video is going to be a review on that very game. So before we start the review, let me give a brief overview. This is Age of Renaissance from the Avalon Hill from the 90s. I have played the game. I think it would be a bit hard for me to do a review without actually playing it. In this game, you are playing as, it's a bit hard to say exactly what the theme is, but you may imagine it being trade empires in, of course, medieval Europe. It's not actually limited to just the Renaissance. And what I mean trade empires, you start the game controlling an individual city. So in this example here, it would be Barcelona. And it plays up to 6 players, I should know. It's 3 to 6 players. And so you control your city, and you go out and you expand into the neighboring regions as depicted as such. You gain income for the regions you control, which you track on this here sheet. You use the income, obviously, to expand more. You can also use it to buy. These are basically technologies. They're called advancements in the game, and they give you special powers. They let you go travel further on the map, go to new regions, things of that nature. And the game ends when you go through this deck of cards, which will have sort of different events, and they'll have resource money that you gain for controlling certain territories on the board, and historical figures as well. And so that's a very brief overview of the game. Now, as for the review, first off, I'm going to say this game, definitely not for everyone. I really like the game. I've met a lot of people that don't really like the game. And the reason being that is this is sort of a very much, it's a luck-based game. So when you expand out, that's not a lot of luck if there's no one next to you. But when there's other players next to you, then you're going to start rolling your dice. And you win or lose battles based on those die rolls. Now, there is a system where, depending on what your turn order is, which changes each round, changes how likely you are to win the battle. Whoever goes first, they're going to basically win all their battles. Whoever goes last, they're going to lose all their battles. But the catch side of this, though, is whoever goes first, it's done in like sort of a bid manner, where whoever goes first is the player that is going to expand the least. They have, spent the least amount of money towards their, I don't know if it's merchants or something like that, but they've dedicated the least amount of resources to expansion. So they'll win all their battles, but not have a lot of battles. Whoever goes last, well, they'll lose just about all their battles, but they're going to have a lot of battles. And so there's a little bit of balancing in that. And so that's probably one positive aspect that counteract that luck. But arguably what has more luck than even just a combat expansion is the cards. The cards really determine the game. If a resource card appears more often than other cards, or then whoever controls those resources, they're going to get more money. And some of these cards, you play them on other players, and then they just get wrecked by them. You can hit a player with Civil War, and boom, their entire empire has really just been destroyed. It's all the bad things put on one card. Because of this luck aspect, this type of game, right, it's themed as this economic game, it's themed as this resources and finances game, but it's really for those types of people that, they just want to sort of let randomness and let craziness happen. Doesn't mean that if you don't try to plan things out, it's turn out good or bad for you. You do require some amount of planning, and there's definitely a lot of strategies to be found in this game. But for players that, if you're a Euro game player, you don't like a lot of luck in your games, well, this is definitely not the game for you. The mechanics of this game are sort of meant to be weird, which I've met some players that they play it and they say, the mechanics they're a bit too weird for me. That's a bit, doesn't fully make sense to me. Well, for those players that like this type of game, though, it's a bit of the fact that the mechanics don't always have to make sense, that it's a bit of a go with the flow. So if you're someone that goes with the flow, this might be your type of game. If you're not someone that goes with the flow, this might not be your type of game. There's a few other things to note that I should bring up. There's this misery track, which is basically negative points that it's a way to punish players depending on what actions they do. There is obviously the combat between players. There's a good amount of player interaction, I would actually say, for this game. Let's see, what do I want it? I want to say some of the the goods and the bads. So, of course, I told you some of the bads is the luck. Well, what's some of the good? All right, some of the good is a lot of different strategies. I was talking about that. So, you don't have to win the game just by expansion, right? I've seen players win where they just get, they get a resource card like this, like ivory and gold, for example, and they'll hold it onto their hand, and they'll purposely make sure they get as many of these territories as possible, and then once they do, they play the card to get a lot of points. I've seen other players go where they focus really only on technology, where they focus all they can on getting as many of the different advancements, because they also give you points as well. So I've seen a lot of different strategies. Of course, there's, going after the leader is always a strategy, but it's not really your only option. And there's enough luck in it that even players that are far behind, they can risk and still have a chance of coming up ahead in the end. Now, the game has a nice few features in it. One is the versatility in player count. You can do 3 all the way up to 6 players. And as you do, you unlock more of the map. So if you do 3 players, you get sort of the Mediterranean Sea. And then as you get more players, you unlock more Northern Europe up here. You can also set how long you want to play the game. So there's sort of a short and medium and long mode. This isn't all the cards. I just grabbed out a random amount. But as you sort of go into, the longer games, it actually is sort of like an early, mid, and late game in this. Because in the early game, you're expanding, you're taking just, your neighboring lands. In mid-game is when you start to have some of your more conflict with players, and then there's sort of a big race to get over to the Middle East, because everyone starts in Europe, but so everyone will then try to race over to the Middle East as much as they can. And you might look at this and be like, well, how is London or Hamburg, how are these players supposed to get all the way over to here, versus say, Venice, who starts right next to it? Well, there is a thing with the technologies, right? So there is technologies that let you, because remember, this is a game of wild stuff, let you basically just go anywhere. There's seaworthy vessels may enter all coastal provinces. So if you get that, and you're London, well, feel free to go right all the way over here. So, and that's what I mean when there is a lot of wacky mechanics in this game, which you may or may not like. Now, let's see. Oh yeah, so that's the mid game, is you go over here. Late game is then you actually discover, like you start contacting with India and China and the New World, and they are then the extra powerful territories. And then, your level of peace, you go slow level of peace, some minor fighting, and then late game there's a lot of fighting for control of resources, and technologies are appearing just like that. So, I don't want to make this video be too long, but I would say this is a good game that I would recommend people try it at least once. Now, it's not a good game for everyone. It's more of like a 1 out of 5 people might actually like this game type of game. But, there's something a bit, I find, fun in the fact that it's just very crazy. And, one moment you'll be riding in first, and then next moment you'll be in last place. Maybe not exactly that much, but that's, sometimes how the game feels. Now, if you're not the type of player that overly likes a bit of wildness, or really more extreme wildness, that doesn't necessarily have a good rationale, this probably isn't your type of game. But for the small people that do like it, who do like Age of Renaissance, I give this game a review of pretty good for me and not good for others. And I'll leave it at that. Just felt as though I should get a video in, since I hadn't done it in like months. And that is Age of Renaissance.